grandpa stole his first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome, America, to America's family history show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Genies, it is so good to be back with you. I cannot even begin to tell you all the stuff that has happened to me since we last met just a few weeks ago. Let's bring in David Allen Lambert. He is the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society at AmericanAncestors.org. And David, Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year to you. We've
got some great guests today. We got Kristen Winger in from Legacy Tree Genealogist. She started fresh on a project that she hadn't looked at in years and made some incredible discoveries. That's the kind of thing that I've done here the last few weeks, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. And Maureen Taylor is here, of course, the photo detective, talking about creating albums and some of the different themes you can do and how easy it is to do. That'll be later on in the show. Well, David, it was one of those weird Christmas breaks because we were all set to go on a trip to Southern California, hang out with my newly married son and his beautiful wife, and then my wife got COVID. And so we couldn't go anywhere. We were stuck here. We couldn't see anybody. And, this is like the third miserable year in a row with the pandemic and everything. Mm-hmm. But it gave me a chance to do a lot of research, which is kind of my default when there's nothing else going on,
Well, when you can't hang with descendants, you might as well hang with the ancestors.
That's exactly it. Yes. So I was doing some research on Dutchess County, New York, and some ancestors there. One of my revolutionary guys I've had some struggles with. And while I didn't resolve the question, I found a lot of new information I had never seen before and a lot of new pieces of evidence on the case I was working on. And in the process, I go over to YouTube. I don't know why. Maybe it just came up in a Google search. I don't remember how I found it. But here were these two guys digging up one of my ancestors in Ulster County, New York, right across the Hudson River from Dutchess County, New York. And they were direct descendants of this guy as well. They exhumed him. He's my 7th great-grandfather and my 8th great, along with his wife, who's my 7th and 8th great, because they had to find where they were buried and then prove that they had the right people so they could mark the place. I've got these guys as guests on the show next week to talk about the entire project. And it's one of the most remarkable stories for a couple of amateur genealogists that I've ever heard in my entire life. It's crazy. And for those of you listening who have descent from Cherrick Clayson DeWitt in Kingston, New York, you might want to pay attention to this one.
Wow, that is amazing. What an amazing genealogical gift to the descendants of this gentleman and his family. I mean, wow. One, you've located them. Two, all the DNA, all the science behind it. And then, what are they going to do? Are they going to reinter them at some point?
Yeah, they will. And they're going to do the old-fashioned Dutch funeral. So we're not going to spoil everything here, but there's all the evidence to prove that they've got the right guy, and it's just moving forward, and I'm really looking forward to sharing this whole story with everybody next week on Extreme Genes.
Well, I want to share with you a holiday game. We're always hearing about Harry and his bride and Charles and his bride and William and his bride. Well, one of the ways we celebrated the holidays in my house was to figure out what your royal name is. So I'm going to tell you how to do this. So are you a lord or a lady? So you assign that first.
Yep.
Your pet's name or the last pet you had, the last thing you ate, add the connecting word of,
yes,
and then to wrap it up, the last place you shopped. So, for me, I became Lord Patch's Apple of Barnes & Noble.
All right, let's see.
Out for you?
What would it be? It'd be Lord Shiloh Walnut Shrimp of Smith's.
Oh, well, my goodness. I'll have to get my invitations for the next soiree I have at my house at Barnes & Noble. So anyways, a little fun game to play at any time of the year. Well, I love stories that reunite people. And two South Korean-born children that were put up for adoption back in 1985 using DNA testing from 23andMe, well, they found each other.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. But it's even more amazing, Fish, these twins placed second on The Amazing Race.
Yeah, and they hadn't been together in 36 years.
Wow. Starting the new year off with a lot of wow.
Yes.
Here's one. We always hope that Aunt Mary will find the old family Bible in the attic or turn over some old genealogical notes. Over in China, a handwritten family tree dating back to the Ming Dynasty, that's circa 1368 to 1644, was discovered in North China's Hebei province. This was found in a villager's home, and it was last seen probably 500, 600 years ago. And it traces the family back, nuts. And it's rare to see such a well-preserved family tree. It gives abundant details on geography, the environment, land, and of course, the families. Yeah. Unbelievable. Sometimes you employ people that become like family. Well, how about when you employed somebody, turns out they actually were family. This lady in Spokane, Washington, realized that Lydia Danielson, who is her current housekeeper, is actually related to her through 23andMe, again, their DNA tests.
Yeah, they're cousins. And they've been very close for the last many years, and she's been part of the family for deaths and marriages and taking care of the kids and helping them grow up. And now they found out, yeah, they're cousins. How cool is that?
That is really cool. Most people you work with can become like family. In this case, the people you work for and with actually were family.
Yeah,
amazing.
It's nuts.
Well, that's all I am from Beantown. And if you want to start the year off right, don't forget American Ancestors would love to have you as a member. Use the coupon code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org and save $20 on the membership.
All right. Great stuff, David. Thank you so much. We will talk to you again in a little bit at the back end of the show for Ask Us Anything. And coming up next from our sponsors over at Legacy Tree Genealogists, Kristen Winger is starting the year off right, starting fresh on a case she hasn't looked at in some time. You'll love the story and how she solved it. It's all coming up in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it. Hey Genies, as we've dug into our family history explorations over the past year, our community at Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies has taken off. This is where you can meet like-minded genealogists who can help you break through those brick walls and find a whole city behind it, occupied by ancestors whose names you don't even know yet. This is where you can learn from your fellow genies and ask questions, because many in our community have already been into some of the records you're looking for. Genealogy and Breakthrough Strategies is free. What a great place for brainstorming and getting to know other people who totally get your passion for family history research. If you're looking to take the next step in sharpening your skills, here's a great chance to learn from others and give back in areas you've already become expert in. So join us. That page again is Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. It's a long name, but we cover a lot of territory. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. Well, it's a new year, and we are so excited at Extreme Genes to be hearing all kinds of new stories and learning how they're discovered. And with that whole thing in mind, I've got Kristen Winger on the line. She's from our sponsors over at Legacy Tree Genealogist, a researcher there. And Kristen, welcome to Extreme Genes. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
I read your blog that you had on the Legacy Tree website about Mamie. Tell us the story of Mamie and how this whole thing evolved as you researched it.
Sure. Well, Mamie was orphaned. Her mother died when she was 4 years old, and her father had 5 children. The oldest was 9, and the youngest were a set of twin boys who were 1.5. So he really had his hands full. He was not a man of significant means, and he needed to keep working. So he ended up putting them in an orphanage. Ooh. And so when I found Mamie, she was in the 1910 census, and she was in this Lancaster County Children's Home in Pennsylvania, which sadly they also called the Home for Friendless Children. And that was the last I could find of her under the name Mamie Hornberger. She seemingly disappeared from the records. Ooh. And I found a really cool newspaper article. This was about 20 years later in 1930, where her twin brothers, who had been put up for adoption when they were only 1.5, they ended up being adopted in New Jersey, but managed pre-internet and pre-DNA testing to find their way back and found their father.
Wow.
Living here in Lancaster County when they were 21. And so it's this great article about their joyful reunion and how excited he was. But, that was tempered with some sorrow because he was still missing his daughter and he just did not know how to go about finding her. Monroe, her father, didn't really have the resources to find her. When I took up the case, and I think this is the case for a lot of us as genealogists, when we start out, we don't have all of the resources and tools and skills that we learn later.
Yes.
So it is one of those things that I went back and revisited. And so I encourage everybody to do that because number one, you'll approach it from a better place. And number two, there may be more records available. We know that Ancestry, Family Search are always digitizing more records, putting them online. But remember that your local archives and those local repositories may also be creating new indexes of some of those records that before there really was no method to access and know that they had them.
Imagine how hard that had to be for the dad to try to figure out, where do I go next? I mean, it had been how many years now since he'd put his daughter up for adoption? He's got the 2 boys. He wants this girl to complete the family. I mean, he really was in a no-win situation.
Yeah, so Monroe had been looking for her for about 20 years. And there were a couple reasons I came to find that he could not find her. Number one, her name was changed when she was adopted. Number two, the family moved to Philadelphia, which was a much larger city, and the father died. So it was just left with his mother, who's, of course, her name was Mary, a very common name. Oh, boy. And she actually ended up having a baby and taking the father's name. So her name changed again.
So you got 3 name changes, right, over a short period of time, really, relatively speaking. Boy, that really makes it tough, especially pre-internet.
Oh, yeah. And that's really one of my passions, is discovering and telling the stories of people who are more hidden in the records because of either name changes or they aren't named at all. So, women, children, African Americans, any of those people, they can be much more difficult to find for that very reason.
So once she moved to Philadelphia, where did this go from there?
So it's actually a really funny story how they found each other. Mamie moved back towards the Lancaster area as an adult, and she evidently went to a farmer market. And one of the vendors there told her, there is a woman that comes here that really just looks a lot like you. And so this other woman laughed and said, okay, well, let her know I'll be here at such and such day and time, and we can meet. And so Mamie showed up, and it turned out that they were sisters. And this was the oldest daughter. She was 9 at the time that they were all split up, and Mamie was only 4. So
Wow.
older sister did have, more memories.
So did Mamie have some idea that she was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
I am not sure that she did. That's something that isn't included in the records, so we may not know for sure. This story about how they reunited, I actually got from a DNA match. So I was able to test both of my grandparents, and my grandfather just passed away this year, but it was his DNA that connected me to these DNA matches that were descendants of, Mamie's line.
So this was your own family?
Oh, yes. Yeah, this was one that was my own family.
How cool is that? You think back then, if she had no idea that she was from there and went there from Philadelphia, it's kind of a God thing, right?
Oh, yeah. Some of those moments of, serendipity or God arranging things, you never know.
So you've now gone through and done this through DNA because were you looking for Mamie yourself, or are you trying to understand the story? And what brought you to search this since this was in your family?
Right. So I wanted to find out what happened to her after that 1910 census enumeration in the orphanage. And so the DNA part actually came in a little bit later, that I got the story of how they were reunited. The break in the case, so to speak, came when I went to the Lancaster County Archives. Like I mentioned before, they had recently created some indexes of something called a trust book. And I wouldn't have known as a newer genealogist to look in a trust book for an adoption, but that's where it was housed. And, working in different jurisdictions for legacy tree, different states and different counties, especially those court records, they are organized differently. They call them all different kinds of things.
Yes.
But that's where the adoption case was indexed.
Now, were you directed to that book by somebody there?
No. So I was actually able, they have some pretty nice indexes online. So I found the index online, and then I went to the archives in person, although they do offer remote research services for people who aren't nearby. And I got the trust book, and, it just had a little paragraph. It's more like a docket of the court proceedings. Sure. So I was like, okay, well, I know she was adopted, but the key was asking the archivist if there was anything else related to this that is not indexed that they had in their holdings.
Good.
And he came back with an entire adoption file. I think it was at least 5 or 6 pages. And it had sworn statements from the people who adopted her, who were named Samuel and Mary King, a sworn statement from Monroe giving permission for the adoption, and even the directors of the home for children where she had been living. And in this document, it specifically said that the said Mamie Hornberger shall assume the name of Cora Mary King. And so that was record of that official name change in this file that is completely unindexed.
Wow.
So that was really the key to, being able to trace her from there.
And there's a real lesson right there for anybody researching. Not everything is indexed, and not everything
Correct.
is online. So you have to ask questions. You cannot be shy.
Right. And I am naturally a person that doesn't like to, feel like I'm imposing on anyone, but generally speaking, these archivists and librarians are, thrilled to have you using their records, and they're more than willing to help. So yeah, don't be shy. Don't be afraid to ask. Another example I can give, with a county archive is divorce files. This same line of my family has a lot of instances of divorces, second great grandparents, fourth great grandparents, and I was able to get their entire divorce file, and it's all this testimony from, children of the couple, siblings of the couple, and you get such a window into what was actually going on in the home. I have one that's 1859, and you're just never going to find that kind of information anywhere else. Again, records that are not indexed, they're not going to pop up as a hint on Ancestry. You need to go to that in-person repository.
Yeah, very true. I remember researching my great-grandfather's divorce from 1874 in New York, but they don't make those publicly available for 100 years in that state. And that's the case in many other places. So obviously by the time I got to it, 100 years had passed, but it was, shall we say, juicy? Really juicy. There was a lot of detail in there that made my eyebrows go up, and a lot of names also that were there. And I've actually researched some of the people who gave testimony in there, because let's face it, Kristen, usually to get a divorce back in those times, somebody had to commit adultery, and that meant there had to be testimony of it and witnesses and statements. There's all kinds of stuff in there like that.
Definitely worth pursuing.
So what was your grandfather's reaction? I take it you figured this out before he passed away. He must have known of the story of the reunion of the family, though not the details. He must have been pretty tickled by all this.
He was excited. Yeah. One of the best things I did was, ask questions of my grandparents. And I was fortunate enough to have my paternal grandparents alive once I got interested in genealogy. My maternal grandparents passed away before that, and it's just such a difference in being able to talk about things with him. And he was actually living when the 1950 census was released back in April. One of my last visits with him, I took the census record where he was a teenager in his parents' house and showed it to him. And we talked about where he was living, and he had gotten his first job off of the farm working in a watch factory downtown. And we talked about things, and it helped him to come out with some tidbits, I think, that he wouldn't have come up with otherwise.
Yes,
and
memory cues. Good stuff. Well, she's Kristen Winger. She is a researcher with Legacy Tree Genealogists, our great sponsors. Great stories, great work, and I can hear your enthusiasm, Kristen. Keep it up.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right, and coming up next, our old friend, the photo detective, Maureen Taylor, as we talk about the great ideal winter projects, creating photo albums on all kinds of themes within your family. It's all coming up next when we return in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. It's our New Year's show for 2023. It is great to have everybody back. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, and I'm so thrilled to have my good friend Maureen Taylor here to start off the new year. And Maureen, of course, is the photo detective. And Maureen, what you been up to lately?
Hey, Happy New Year, Scott.
Thank you, Maureen. You too.
Yeah, what have I been up to? I'm working on a live version of my Essential Photo Organizing course.
Okay, nice.
So people can sign up for that, and actually it'll be live, You sign up for a class and then you never get to it. This is the live one, so you have to show up and then you can ask all your questions.
There you go. This is an interesting conversation, too, and this is one we've had for years, you and I, and many other people, too. It's like, what do you do with the originals as you get later on in your life? You want to make sure your collection goes to somebody who's going to take care of it and all that. And I had a little epiphany here recently that there's a major difference between preserving the originals and making sure the images are out there. There's a difference between just the images and the originals, because the originals can really only be held by one person, right? And oftentimes they're going to wind up in a closet, in a drawer or someplace, and they're the only ones who can enjoy the originals. But if we take those and we create images of them and hopefully sharpen them, maybe even colorize some of them, we can make some remarkable books and even add some commentary to it about who these people are and the stories behind the picture and the period in which it was taken, that type of thing, and then share that with everybody. In essence, make an entire photo album for everyone that's either digital or physical, but certainly much smaller than one of those great big clunky albums that has all the originals in it.
Right. So there are two thoughts on that. There are two camps. There are the people who don't want to share their photographs online.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are people who do not want to put them online because people will lift them and then put them other places and put the wrong ID and all that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you, it happens.
Sure.
I am the photo detective. I see it all the time.
Right.
And then there's the other side of the coin where people are like, I want to put them out there as much as possible. And you can certainly do that on all those family tree sites, right? And I actually think it's a good idea to put some of those images out there. If you don't want to put all of them, put some of them, put a watermark on them so everybody knows it's yours and how they can contact you. But when you do that, I tell clients, like this morning, I met with someone who has a group picture. And I said, here's the thing. The people in this photograph, you have a copy of this or the original. It is possible multiple copies were made and that there were other photographs then given to those descendants of the people in the photograph.
Sure.
You really need to reach out and contact those people and see what happens because they may have the missing photographs that you've been looking for.
Yeah, that's right. Right. It really is the ticket. And I found over the years that if you have something to offer somebody without asking for anything, it engages the dialogue that opens up the possibility that they may have something they may want to share back with you.
Right. And then what you can do is make a photo book.
Yeah.
I had a friend who made a photo book for every year when her son was growing up.
Nice.
So I think he's 20. So she has 20 volumes of his life.
That is outstanding. And I bet you he loves that. If he doesn't yet, he's going to someday.
He will someday. And, you have to curate the collection. What are the photographs that are the most important to tell that story?
Right.
But as genealogists, we have many stories that we can tell.
Yes.
We can tell the immigrant story. We can mix that photograph in with images we might find on the Library of Congress to fill in where they might have lived, what they did. We have census records, and we might have newspapers. You can put all of that in a book, and you can do one for every ancestor. Some people do. You can do them for a group of time, like they were all living in this location, or this is the vacation everybody went on together. I just did one for my poor dear little pupper, which I'm going to give to my daughter because she was originally her dog. And you really can think of it in terms of how to tell the story.
Right.
And how do you do this? It's so easy.
Yeah.
There are websites like I use Snapfish, or the one I created. Super simple. It gives you templates. There are ways to add text. You can add extra pages if you want. It does a hardcover with a name on the spine.
Yeah.
So you can just put it on your bookshelf. You can use something like Shutterfly, same concept. You can do individual photographs if you want, or you can do a whole album. You could do this for the brides in the family.
Yeah, that's a great way to go.
You can do all kinds of things with it.
Yeah, I just finished doing like 5 of these. I did all of our photos from the 19th century on every branch of the family. So I was able to do 50 years worth of photos, and it turned out to be 178 pictures, all in one book. And I just threw them onto Word, and I could make them bigger, smaller, do a little layout, and type up what I wanted to type on it. And then I did the first 20 years of the 20th century. Then I did the 20s and the 30s, and I just finished the 40s a couple of nights ago. And I'm going to take it up. Yeah, it's terrific. And what's fun is all the images are preserved for all the kids and the grandkids, so they all have them. And no matter what ultimately happens with the originals, and that's going to resolve itself in time, at least the images are out there, the important ones, for all these people to have in the future, along with the stories. The other thing is, too, this can kind of be a nice little brief substitute for more detailed histories, because some people just don't like to read that much detail, but they love going through the pictures, especially if they can see a 1 or 2 line story about who the person is and what's the situation there, right?
Right. So here's the thing. Your photographs are amazing. They have storytelling potential.
Right.
But as you mentioned, not everyone wants to sit down and read about the pictures, but they love looking at the photographs.
Yep.
So these books are an option. For my mom, I made mixed tiles, and they're all over the walls of her little apartment.
Very nice.
And she says that she doesn't have to get lonely because she's surrounded by family, which are all the pictures on the wall.
Nice.
And so she can look at them and reminisce. You could do a digital photo frame. We have one of those in our living room. It shows all of our travels in 2020, which is when we went from town to town in our little state because, we weren't allowed to leave. And we took all these amazing photographs, and they're in the frame, and we can sit in the living room and say, oh, I remember when we went there, or I remember when we went there. My Heritage app, you can do storytelling on that. You can do actual capturing of the audio on My Heritage and File Shadow. You can do a digital album through your digital photo organizer like MemoryWeb. I mean, there's so much potential. It's hard to know where to stop. Scott, so stop me.
No, I'm totally with you on that. I've thought about it. I thought, am I crazy? Am I just over the top with this stuff? But I did a little book of my uncle's stories last summer, and just a soft cover, and it's only like 60 pages long, but it sits on our coffee table, and I pick it up now and then and read through it because he was the great storyteller in our family of great storytellers. And I thought, boy, if these photo albums were about this size, it's so easy to just flip through them. And I've really fallen in love with colorization because the colorization shows you things that you don't see in pictures until you do it. The other thing is it also makes them more real in many cases. So I've colorized a lot of these and shared them in that way.
As long as the caveat is the colorization is good, it's not perfect.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm glad we have the tools, and I'm glad the tools are so easy for anyone to use.
Really.
The My Heritage tools, the Vivipix tools. You don't have to spend months, if not years, learning a very sophisticated program. It does it for you. It's a mouse click, and you've got an improvement.
That's it.
It's a perfect winter project.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Happy New Year to you, my friend. It has been great to talk to you and have you on for our first show of the new year, and I look forward to catching up with you later this year and see what you've been up to.
Thank you.
She's Maureen Taylor, the photo detective. Go to MaureenTaylor.com. David Allen Lambert rejoins me in minutes as we go through another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Genies, our friends at BYU TV have a new series out created just for us, family historians. It's called How I Got Here. It's a fast-paced travel show where young adults accompany their immigrant parents back to where they came from, their countries of origin. These are 10-day trips of a lifetime where these parent-child duos relive the sacrifice, struggle, and circumstances that led their families to leave to where they are now. There's a new episode every week with visited countries including Italy, Serbia, Mexico, Chile, Israel, Slovakia, and Ghana. BYU TV is on Roku and Fire Stick, online at byutv.org, or through the BYU TV app. How I Got Here is available now with a new episode every week. Feel the impact this journey has on those who grew up not knowing. And just a warning, keep a box of Kleenex nearby. You're going to need it.
Have you hit a brick wall in your family tree? Are you unsure how to use your DNA test results to resolve a research question? Do you want to travel where your ancestors walked and need to find details before you go? Need help joining a lineage society? Whatever your genealogy research question, the answer is Legacy Tree Genealogist. Legacy Tree Genealogist has been helping clients all over the globe discover their story since 2004. Legacy Tree has carefully selected and trained professionals who specialize in hundreds of countries and languages, as well as probate research and DNA analysis. And when you need experts on the ground in the countries where your ancestors came from, Legacy Tree Genealogists calls upon its global network of on-site researchers who know the local language and how to get their hands on the records you need. Request your free quote today at legacytree.com. That's legacytree.com.
Hey, Genies.
Ancestry now has an exclusive partnership with PhotoMine, the leader in photo scanning and archiving. What does this mean to you? Well, imagine inheriting an old photo album and you want to digitize all the images. Up until now, you'd have to remove the pictures, place them in a scanner, crop them, and perhaps use Photoshop to improve them. Now, by using these amazing PhotoMine tools from Ancestry, you can use your phone to take a picture of an entire page from your album. The tools will automatically separate and crop each picture, improve focus, and restore color or colorize your images. Then you can assign which picture goes to which person on your tree. If you've been waiting years to get around to the tedious project of scanning your old albums, it's been worth the wait. No more pulling your photo albums apart and trying to reinsert the pictures back in proper order. No more tearing of your old photos while removing them from those so-called magnetic albums of the 1970s. Sign in to Ancestry through their mobile app to try it out.
All right, back for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here. David Allen Lambert is back from the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org in Boston. And Dave, this comes from Maurice in Butler County, Ohio, and he says, guys, I found in a name search my ancestors listed in something called the proprietorship records. What are they and what might they tell me? That's a good question, Dave.
Ooh, that's a set of records that a lot of people don't know about because I know I'm always telling people about them. So let's tell some more people about them.
Sure, yeah.
When you think about researching your ancestors and you're looking for land records, you're thinking, well, if they lived in a city, you're going to look for city directories because they probably rented. If you live out in a farming area, they may have gotten a land grant or they may have purchased a property. So you go to the registry of deeds. Some of them are on town levels like they are in Connecticut. Some of them are in county levels like they are here in Massachusetts. But even earlier, proprietorship groups were set up usually by the governor or the governor's council, for example, here in Massachusetts, where a plot of land that was not sold would be governed by a small group of proprietors. Now, these proprietors didn't own all of the land as a whole. They were sort of like overseers of the land, if you will. What they would then do, Fish, is that people would make application to get a proprietorship lot to settle out there. And there would be common land, like the Boston Common, where you would graze your animals and you could have your horses, your pigs, whatever, out there. That way, your lot may have not had animals on it. And it might be a town lot. It could be a wood lot. But proprietorship lots were set up in a very systematic way. They were usually mapped, and the town proprietorship records are not usually with the registry of deeds. So their own separate records, usually still preserved in the town level. Some town assessors' offices have the records still dating back to the 17th century.
Crazy.
But they were usually fallen out of common use by the mid-19th century because all the proprietorship land was already divided. I mean, think of one of your ancestors, Fish, like the one we were talking about from New York, that you have a 500-acre parcel of land in, say, 1710. By 1850, chances are it's been divided up 20 different ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
These proprietorship records usually became unused and become antiquated. So where do they go? Historical societies get them. Registry of deeds get them. They don't know what to do with them, so they usually put them in miscellaneous records and they get lost occasionally. But Family Search, luckily, has gone through and sought these out. So if you're looking for proprietorship records, you want to look under the town itself. And in fact, some of them have been published. So you can find the list of the people, the lot number that they owned, the acreage, how much they paid, and then the different taxes. Sometimes there's even maps, which are great, especially when you're trying to figure out where your ancestor's house was or maybe where your ancestors are buried on their farm.
Well, that's pretty interesting. I don't know that I'm real familiar with those. Do those extend out away from the coast in New England and the East?
They're usually found in the 13 colonies. And again, it's going to vary. It's heavily used in New England.
Okay.
But these ideas of proprietors setting off these parcels of land, most of them started latter part of the 17th century into the 18th century when more land is being pushed west, like, for instance, in Massachusetts. You may look for your ancestors' earliest arrival fish in the colonies, and you're looking for that deed. You find the deed of him selling the property, but you never find him buying it. It's because it's in the proprietorship records, not in the land records.
All right. Wow. Good stuff and great answer, David. Thank you so much. We got another question coming up next in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. All right, here we go. Final segment this week on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. Fisher here, David Allen Lambert over there. And Dave, question number 2 this week is from Adrian in Omaha, Nebraska. And Adrian writes, Happy New Year's, guys. Over the holidays, I interviewed my 96-year-old aunt. And she told me some great stories and some things I definitely didn't know. Where do I go from here? Boy, talk about a wide open question, Dave. And I guess we have to start with the idea, did she record it on audio? Did she get video of this interview? Or was it notes? Because those certainly can affect what your next step might be.
Well, that's very true. And, one of the things with video is obviously you get the image, you get the expression, the hand gestures, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But you also get the audio. Now, if you get the audio, you're not getting all of the other with the video. Both of those can be transcribed. There are apps out there that can listen and just transcribe what people are saying. If you go through your notes, when you've written them all down, you're going to probably want to go back and then video or audio recorder anyways, because you're going to have lost something in the translation, or you may not be certain you got it right. So why not do it again?
Yeah, that's a thought. That's one way you could go. The other thing is, and having done many of these over many, many years, when you do these interviews, inevitably when they tell you these stories, suddenly something from those stories can be researched. For instance, a newspaper story, right?
Sure.
Or track down other people that might have been involved in it. Remember, many years ago on Extreme Genes, Dave, we talked about how my mother stowed away on a ship in 1948. And I was writing her account of that and thought, oh, it's too bad there's nobody left that I could talk to about that. And I wound up tracking down 2 of the people she stowed away with, and they told us the whole thing on Extreme Genes. So it was a great find and a lot of fun to get another perspective on the same story from people who were there, because my mom had been gone for several years at that point. And that's the kind of thing that you can do with this. But the best part of your situation is, Adrian, you have that person still there. So if you need clarity on a story or more detail, just go over to their place if they're not too far and like you say, Dave, re-interview.
One of the things that a lot of people have learned since COVID started is Zoom.
Yeah.
Send a Zoom invite. A lot of seniors or relatives are going to have used Zoom or maybe something similar, or they may have a family member that knows it. Set up a Zoom and hit record. You get the MP3 and the MP4 automatically saved.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of capturing stories. Or better yet, just interview yourself. I think one of the greatest things about interviewing people, sometimes we're the ones that have all the information as a genealogist. Sit down and interview yourself sometime during this winter.
Yeah.
And be surprised what things you will unload just by talking about a relative. Our stories are just as important as our ancestors, and sometimes we're the only ones that keep those stories alive.
Yeah, and we can tell the ancestor stories that way too. We can do our own stories, or dad's or mom's or grandma or grandpa or great-great-grandparents, whatever we've discovered. And, as the family historians, I think people look to us for these things. And when we're gone, it's great to leave these behind so that they can continue to enjoy them. So thank you very much for the question, Adrian. David, thank you so much for your contributions again this week. And we will talk to you again next week.
Until then, my friend.
And thanks once again to Kristen Winger from our sponsors at Legacy Tree Genealogist for coming on and talking about her fresh look at an old project and how it resulted. And to Maureen Taylor, of course, the photo detective, talking about creating photo albums in the winter. Great winter project. Of course, next week, I'm going to be talking to those two descendants of one of my ancestors, actually several of them. They have exhumed these people from a churchyard in Dutchess County, New York. You're going to want to hear the entire story. Make sure you do not miss it on Extreme Genes. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.